Welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I'm your host, Anna Gray. The best thing about being a nurse and entrepreneur over the last 25 years are the relationships I've developed and the people I've met. As a legal nurse consultant, I wanted you to hear from those amazing people in the legal and healthcare communities. I wanted you to hear who they are and to celebrate them with me. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. Let's dive into the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. Hey guys, welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I have a very special guest. He is the inaugural physician guest on this podcast. So I wanted to welcome Dr. Jordan Romano. Well, you can tell us more about where you're coming from, but please, welcome. For those of you listening to this podcast and not watching this will be up on video, but I told him that he won the award so far of the best set on the other side. So welcome to this podcast. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. So Dr. Romano, can you tell our audience where you're coming from, what part of the country you're coming from, and then we'll dig in.
Yeah, I live in Boston, Massachusetts currently.
Awesome. And you're not my first guest from Boston. I love Boston, actually. I've been there quite a few times because I play hockey, and that's really the only reason why, but I love it there. So.
It's a great place to play hockey.
Yeah. It's a little different than California. That's where we're coming from over here. So it's a little different, but that's awesome. Okay. So have you always been in Boston? Are you born and raised in Boston?
I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia in a town called Westchester. Mm-hmm. Typical suburban high school upbringing. Yeah. Sports and that sort of thing. And I didn't travel far. I went to undergrad in maybe 40 minutes away from home at Franklin and Marshall College.
Okay. What was your undergrad degree? I was like the back.
Dual major, biology and government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you always want to be a physician? Did that start off early? Why you went?
Not really. So I graduated in 2001. So everybody can probably figure it out. I'm in my mid 40s. So in 2001, the United States had an interesting year for sure. Up until that point, I was going to be joining my family in banking. My father, my aunt, my grandfather, my grandmother, a bunch of family friends, all were in banking in New York City at a specific bank. And the bank was sold in 2001. And so that sort of mixed things up for me. All of my friends went into grad school or law school, and I took a gap, what they now call a gap year. So it was a tough year.
Yeah. So you had to kind of change your trajectory. Did you have any family members or anyone close by that was in the medical field, or how did you come to that decision? Did you come to that decision during that gap year? Did you travel? What did you do in that gap year?
I had done the prerequisites as pre-med. I was a late bloomer in college. I would say the second half, my grades and marks, probably like most people, were, takes some time to kind of find your rhythm. And so it took a little time to get the marks that would help me get into medical school. And at that time, I just needed another year to strengthen the balance sheet, if you will, to get into medical school. It was there. It's sort of a pinnacle degree. And so, if I wasn't going to go to the bank, I had a backup, and that was, hey, I like science. I think medicine could be interesting. So that was there and ready to go.
Okay. All right. And where did you end up going to medical school?
Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. Much to my parents' chagrin, I went to the first medical school that I got into. They kind of wanted me to take another year to strengthen my MCAT, to reapply. And I had already taken a year off. My friends are in law school. Other friends are in grad school. And I just was very eager to take the next step. But, you know, the other thing I'll say that sometimes you make miscalculations, right? Despite everybody having gone before you, in law school, if you have a really good first year, you can springboard to and transfer to another program. I thought you could do that in med school. So I was like, whatever, I'll go to a med school, I'll graduate. And I was really towards the top of my med school class in year one. And I went to go transfer, and all the schools I contacted were like, we don't accept transfers. This isn't like law school. And that was a tough moment there. So
That's interesting. Yeah, no, I've never known that. That's very interesting. Okay, so we went to medical school, and then where did your journey follow you, or where did you
yeah, I mean,
follow?
I was a great medical student. But I think in hindsight, I was studying for a test, and I became very good at taking tests. That helped me get into my residency for sure. I noticed I share with folks that don't do this strategy. I tend to like to put my eggs in one basket and just watch that basket very well. I had noticed that the scramble list, I think they call it something different now, but the scramble, if you don't match, there is a list of all the slots that are still open, residency slots that are still open. So I decided I wanted to be an internist, do internal medicine for residency, but I only ranked one place. I only ranked Dartmouth. I had seen that somebody from our medical school had gone to this residency a couple years before me. And so I said, well, you know, if he's doing well, they know of the school, I have a decent chance of getting in. I bet a lot of people are not going to apply because they think it's hard to get in. And if I don't get in, I would rather scramble than put something on my list that I'm really kind of ho-hum about. So I did. I put all my eggs in one basket, interviewed at Dartmouth, went back for a second interview, and devised, I had a bit of a war room. I had a calendar with who I'm going to contact when, who I'm going to email, who I'm going to call, and the plan worked out. I matched at Dartmouth. So
Yeah.
3 years at Dartmouth for internal medicine residency. Then I stayed on staff for 2 years there, working nights. I would say it was probably the best job for somebody just starting out, to just crank out lots of work. I think it's, that's an interesting point. A lot of folks these days, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, is what people call side hustles, or, another job and a way to decrease your FTE. When you're first starting out, you spend so much time learning this medicine. I think it's not only wrong, I would say it's advisable to just solidify that knowledge by cranking out a lot of clinical shifts. So if they're younger folks, regardless of if they're a nurse or if they're a physician listening to this, I think that's a huge piece of advice that I would give, is that don't shy away. You're hearing all this, do something else, or reduce this, or it's tough. Yeah, but good things. Part of the reason you and I are sitting where we are is because we did all of that hard work. We paid our dues. And we've become experts in our respective fields. And to become an expert, you need to do what other people aren't willing to do. And we're in a time now where a lot of folks don't want to spend extra time in the hospital. So if you're that individual who wants to do that, I think you're setting yourself up well for the future.
That's really interesting that you brought that up, because I actually have that conversation with a lot of surgeons that I work with on new partners that they've taken on, that are kind of shocked with just how much work there is for them. And I come from the old school where, that's exactly what you did. You started and you kind of didn't have a life for the first 10 years of your
Yeah.
practice, because you were, getting your chops, basically. And you kind of, were at everybody's beck and call, and, that's what you did. But nowadays there is this new view about medicine once people get into practice, that it's almost like a deer in the headlights. Like, wait, I didn't expect this, which is, it's a great topic of conversation, but I am seeing it more and more. So I'm really, really glad that you brought that up, because I totally believe in that as well. It's like, you do your time, and then you reap the benefits later, I suppose. You've done all of the hard work, all the heavy lifting. You understand the process, you understand everything inside and out because you've worked so hard at it. So I love the fact that you shared that. Okay.
Well,
So you worked, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is be careful. Folks need to understand who they're getting their advice from and what they've been through. I think so. That's also important for your listeners, is, where they are in their life may be different and from the person giving the advice. And so you need to understand why certain, and hopefully I'm explaining that, is why certain decisions were made the way they were made. I think that right now there's a lot of time being spent on balance and burnout. This might be controversial, but I think it's hard for a new doc to be burned out. Yeah. You're just new. So this idea of balance, that being said, I have 2 young sons. I will say, if you have a young family, okay, like that's a real conversation. But if you're just starting out and you do not have a family, I don't know. I just think anything great that I've achieved in my life was, the word balance was not part of that conversation. It was put to the side. And that doesn't mean, I'm not talking about suffering or doing something where you're working so hard that, right, you're skipping out on sleep and things of that nature. I'm just talking about working hard. And I think that the conversation for younger individuals listening to this, doctors or otherwise, if you're a younger doctor, there's something to be said about grinding it out in the hospital. We're 2 individuals who are certainly in the latter chapters of our clinical career. I'm probably mid-career, but I've been doing this for 15 years. So I think it's what I'm saying to the newer folks is, you're listening to somebody who's been doing this for 15 years, right? And so you're in a different chapter, and therefore how you view things, you might benefit from viewing things slightly differently than I do.
Right. And like you said, it's not for the rest of your life. There is a period of time where you start to look at things a little different. You do the hard work up front, and then things like what we're doing here is, you can still use your knowledge, your practice to start to balance. And like you said, I'm in my tail end of this. I've been in the medical field for over 25 years. So I've done my time, and I'm hitting empty nest syndrome, and now it's time to balance my life a little bit differently. And so it's not forever. That hard work is not forever. And I guess naturally, if you're a hard worker, you're still going to continue to do that. We kind of talked about that before we went live, and just how many hours a week you work on this and on that. If you're naturally a hard worker, you're still going to put in those hours. They're just going to be a little different looking. But yeah, upfront, hard work, enjoy the benefits later when you can balance. It's kind of part of the life cycle, I suppose. And really good advice for those young people like my children who are launching in life right now. So it's we do have those conversations about hard work versus balance at the age that they're in, the timeline that they're in. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so you're working nights. And how long did you said you worked nights? 2 years, and then what happened?
2 years.
Yeah. Okay. What?
Social reasons pulled me down to met my current wife and pulled me down into Massachusetts. Came down to Massachusetts General Hospital. It's been coming on 13 years now, which is hard to believe. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and while there, I would say I've had 2 kind of 6-year experiences. The first 6 years was that chapter of grinding it out, lots of shifts, staff shortages, giving up summers, lots of extra shifts. committee work, learning how the hospital works,
Mm-hmm.
being given opportunities because you're in the hospital. So frequently you're going to bump into, hospital leadership and leaders in the hospital. Then I was in charge of a 30-bed unit. And one day a physician came in who had been my clinical supervisor for the past 6 years now. For that second 6 years, he said, we're building this group off practice to handle international executive health and some concierge patients. I handled the international and executive patients. So I did a combination in the last 6 years of doing some outpatient medicine, but also still doing hospital medicine and teaching service hospital medicine inside the hospital. I had been at the hospital for 6 years and I realized this hamster wheel will keep going until I say uncle. And so when this opportunity came up, I was just like, you know what? It's still in the hospital system. It sounds interesting. Let's go for it. And so that's what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. You were open to hearing what's next. I think that's also part of it. I think that, like you said, that hamster wheel can go on forever. And in the nursing field, that's the case. You run into nurses that have been nurses for 30 years and they've been OR nurses for 30 years and they've been at the same facility for that entire time because they were too afraid to change, afraid of, fear of failure, fear of change. But it's very easy to go down that rabbit hole and just continue to work and work and work but when you have an open mind and you're kind of curious, those things I think tend to show up, and they have showed up in my life. Is just that, I'm open to listening to what's out there. And it sounds like that's exactly, what you did. It was like, okay, tell me more. Oh, this is interesting. And then it allows you to expand just, who you are and what you do. And it broadens, your expertise. It broadens your relationships. It's just, I don't know, it makes you, I love the fact that I have kind of gone through different phases in my nursing career and gone and, I've been at different facilities. I've been in different positions. Um, it's made me who I am today. It's made me, the person that's sitting here doing a podcast, because 25 years ago I would have never thought I'd be sitting here doing a podcast, because at that time I was a surgical tech. I had graduated with a bachelor's degree and couldn't do anything with it. So I went to tech school. And that's all I knew. And then I just kept listening and I was open and moving on to the next phase and going into management and all of the things. So I went a little off off on my own there. But being open to opportunities is really, it's really where the enjoyment, I think, comes into being in the medical field. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's not for everybody. You highlighted a couple personality types that they just do better with regular routine, and there's seasons to your life. I called it chapters. I had about 5 years at Dartmouth. I had 2 roughly 5 or 6 year chunks at Mass General. I'm curious to see what those next chapters are, but it's not for everybody. But I'm the type of individual who has my radar on for opportunities and is always curious. I think it's part of being in medicine is that, look, we're trained to look at differentials or what could be going wrong and taking in information and synthesizing it. So it's not too different when you're looking at other opportunities. It's just about having your radar on and collecting that data and coming up with a differential.
Right. I love the analogy. Okay, so let's talk about where we're at here in this medical legal world. How did that come about for you? Tell us
it was one of those
about how that story came up.
Complete serendipity. We have a workroom. I actually can picture the day and it happening. It was like raining this is a while ago. It was about a decade ago. And I just saw somebody in the room who wasn't usually there. A more senior person. He looked tired. It's always a good time to chat with people at the end of the day, or when they're tired, they tend to, be a little disinhibited and it's easier to chat with people. Sometimes it can be bad. They can be a little bit more agitated, but he looked busy or stressed. And I said, what's going on? He said, I have a case. I'm really busy. I can't handle it. I guess he was looking, I can't remember if he was looking at his phone, but he was, looked upset. And so I said, oh, where's the patient, or let's discuss it, or how can I help? And he said, no, it's a medical malpractice case. And he was like, wait a minute, how long have you been out of residency? I think it had been about 5 years at that time, something like that. And he said, let's go out to lunch. So a day or two later, we go out to lunch, and he just gave me the dime tour of what medical malpractice, what the world looks like from that perspective. Introduced me to the lawyer. I actually still think I have a case that's active with that lawyer. It's an old one, but that's how I got started. Just complete serendipity by asking the question. And then it's been, I would say, a slow roll since then, about a decade ago.
What did you find when he gave you that kind of dime tour? What did you find most interesting about, okay, maybe I should consider going into this world? What was one thing that kind of triggered that?
Yeah, I would say, and this is take this as perhaps my perspective and advice. I didn't know at first, right? I slow rolled into this. I did this one case. It was exciting because it was brand new. I'm like, what is this? This is kind of new. I'm talking to the guy. He gives me some records. I look at it. The lawyer almost coached me through. I said, well, what questions do you have for me? And I didn't have all the answers. So I said, let me go back and take a look. It's kind of like, it's sort of like one of the first few times where you're given your own patient responsibilities on the wards, and you're like, you know what to do, and you've been told what to do, but you're doing it on your own. And so I would say, one case, and then nothing happened for 4 to 6 months. And then he gave me another case. And then I was just like, oh, to get cases, maybe I should do X, Y, or Z. And so I kind of fumbled through, and really for the first, I don't know, six years of doing it, it was slow going. And this is what I tell folks, and advice that I share is, you don't even know you're going to be good at it. So one of the things I always caution people on is, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You don't want to load up on this, because first of all, when you first start out, you're probably not going to be very good at it. You know the medicine, but you don't know the legal world, and you're in a new space. And your reputation matters. And so if you load up on a bunch of work, you're overwhelmed with work, you're not delivering, because you shouldn't be expected to deliver, because you're new. It could hamper what could be long-term success in this space. And so what I would say is, it's okay to do a slow roll in the beginning, and you're not going to know if you're good at it. You may enjoy it, but you're not going to know if you're really good at it until you get more reps in. And sometimes that takes time to see. It's just like medicine. You're not going to see all the diagnoses on day one.
Right.
That's why having those first couple years of being a nocturnist like I was, and admitting 1,000 patients, boy, it really helped me solidify my knowledge, so that moving forward, being an attending was a piece of cake. Right. And so I think the same with being in the med mal world is, you need reps, but you don't want to it would be it's counterintuitive, but you need reps, but they need to come at a certain cadence whereby you can learn appropriately.
Right. And when you say, you in the beginning, you're not great at it. We all are learning, where it's a new thing for us. What would you say are the indications that you become, for lack of a better word, good at it? I do know that in my case, I got very little feedback in the beginning. And so you just had to go with your own gut and thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to assume that I'm doing great because I'm getting no feedback and I'm getting paid for these cases. What would you say an indication of you being seasoned enough to say, okay, I'm good at this?
Yeah, the analogy I give is like a basketball game, at least for one piece of work that you may be asked to do, or physicians certainly are asked to do, which is a deposition. In a basketball game, you could win 100 to 80, but the other team still scored 80 points on you. So you might feel a little beat up. So you could do a good job and not hear anything, right? And so I think a lot of it is the med mal space. You exist. A lot of it's behind the scenes. There are folks, and you're part of that community. I'm part of that community, who are engaging more online. And I think when you're part of that community and learning from that community and engaging with that community, you start to get a sense of where your strengths are and where you can improve. But certainly attaching yourself to a community, I think, is one of the things that it didn't exist, or it was certainly very opaque 10 years ago. And so I would say being part of that doesn't mean you need to post online. It doesn't, but I would say consuming some of that on occasion would be helpful to get feedback.
I was going to say the relationships that you build within the community have, at least for me, have been incredibly helpful in just kind of being this barometer of, am I in the right lane? Do I still need some work? Obviously we all are learning. But yeah, I agree with that community. And I was very surprised that there was a community. I was surprised and I didn't know how I didn't know the kind of effect that it would have on my business, but it has been a godsend for me is just having the community out there and just people, in the same boat you are. It's just like, okay, we're all in this together. Everybody wins. That's kind of why I did this podcast. It was like, everybody wins. We have a conversation. I get to know you. You get to know me. We're all humans. It's not, we don't put anybody up on a pedestal. It's just that we're all doing this together. So I think that the community, I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And the fact that you don't have to be the one out there posting. You just, you have a connection with someone that says,
100%. I think it is a tendency to make that recommendation that, well, to get known, you need to do what other people are doing. And the answer is absolutely not. I mean, I was involved in a case with somebody who has been doing this since, this is what he said in his deposition that I read. He had been doing this since 1994. He had been deposed something like 350 times. He had been, do the math there on how many cases he's taken since 1994. Yeah. And so when you're just starting out and then, you look at an expert like that, this individual doesn't post, on social media about this work that he does. But he may be private, he may not want to also, not everybody, when you go into a hospital, is everybody want to mentor somebody? Does everybody want to, share their private life with somebody or share what they're doing outside of the hospital? No, there are some people though. And I think, again, that's what this community is about. But there are individuals who are, they do this work and they really don't want to discuss it. They're not into advertising. They're not into, lawyers use the word, and it sounds a little, I don't know. Some people don't like it, but it sounds solicitation, like reaching out for work. But by speaking to individuals like us, you can learn how to navigate those preferences.
Right. So, okay, give us an idea because we have our own process on the nursing side. On the physician side, when someone says, okay, I've got a case for you, what does your process look like? Just, not, you don't have to go into detail, but just kind of what does that look like? Because I know that we have our own, all right, we have a case, and then we kind of gather our thoughts and pull whatever we pull together. What does that process look like for you when someone says, hey, I have a case for you?
I would say it depends on how they reached out. If it's email or if it's a phone call, I would say those are the two common ways. If somebody reaches out and there's no further information in an email and they're a new clients, I pick up the phone. I kind of want to get a sense of who they are. The fact of the matter is you're not going to want to work for or work with everyone who
Right.
comes knocking at your door. And so for me, I like to pick up the phone and kind of learn what they're about. You can gauge, not only are they gauging you and your skill set, you can gauge a lot from them. Are they disorganized? Are they, do they have assistants? Are they arrogant? Are they condescending? Are they pleasant? Are they timely? Here's a perfect example. I was busy right now. I'm about to be on service, so I couldn't take this case. They wanted a rush job. That's a whole another podcast about doing rushed work. One of the concerns you have with rushed work is it rushed because the individual's disorganized? This guy needs a response. I passed it on to a friend and colleague of mine. This individual said it was rushed work, and it's been 4 days now, and he still hasn't sent my friend the records. They're disorganized. That's not look, everybody's busy. You try to give them some grace, but I think at the end of the day, this is probably someone who this expert is not going to want to work with again. So going back to it, some of it, the first thing is there's my intake, like who are you, and what is it you're asking me for, and does it sound reasonable? That's 50,000 foot view. If it sounds reasonable, then there's exchange of, then do you like me? Do you have my CV? Do you have the nuts and bolts? Do you have my CV? Do you have the fee structure? And then there's retention, and then the work begins. I think I tend to be less formal. If you've been around enough lawyers, they tend to be, it's just different than medicine, the culture.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying I try to mirror that culture, but when in Rome. So I tend to be professional, but occasionally it's okay to curse around lawyers. Like I think doctors, like you wouldn't think about cursing in the hospital, right? But if you curse while you're on the phone, maybe with somebody who you've worked with before, not on the first phone call, but you're nodding your head. So I think it sounds like you agree with me.
I agree with you in the fact that it is a different world. That was the one kind of unexpected and fearful, because we didn't know. I didn't know what the other side was like. And, what I found is that they're human beings, and they they can have a conversation like you're sitting in the backyard barbecue. And I didn't know that, because I am used to being, I still come from the old school that even if I could be your mother, I will still call you doctor. I will not call you by your first name. That's what I come from. So I come from that world, and then going into the legal side, I have no idea what to expect. How do you address people? And so it was interesting to see just how down to earth attorneys were. It's, for lack of a better term, it's just like, hey, they're kind of informal sometimes, And so I'm glad that you said that, because it is.
Yeah, and sometimes they want to hear more from you, and sometimes it's the facts and just the facts, right? And I think that's when you're new. I think just listening and feeling it out and asking questions, be curious. I think that's the it's okay. This is a process, right? It is not a test. And so when somebody's asking you for some work, and you're getting the sense that they think it's incomplete, hey, it seems like you feel like you'd like some more attention on X, Y, or Z. Would it be helpful if I did 1, 2, and 3? Right? Like this is a service business. You're trying to make sure you're doing good work, and the best way to get that feedback is sort of ask for it. Now, don't ask them to blow smoke. Everybody's busy, and it's probably better to do it over the phone call rather than written, depending on the discovery rules of the jurisdiction that you're in. But I think it's reasonable for you to, I can see, and that's the hard part about doing most of this stuff over Zoom or just over a phone call. I can't see your mannerisms. It's hard to, if I'm just in an email, I can't tell tonality. If you're displeased, if you're pleased, if you're frustrated, if you were curt just because you're rushed and you have other things going on. And so when in doubt, the other advice I would say is pick up the phone. It's old school. It's but that, or pick up the Zoom, see them.
I think that is an incredibly good point. I think that if I put myself in those shoes when I started, and, finishing I did a lot of behind the scenes work, and you would send off your report and never hear back from them. They would pay you, but never hear back from them. Just understanding, that they could be incredibly busy, and they received it. They're just too busy to reply. And that's just who they are. I dealt with a lot of that. And so, you just kind of re-share it, that be confident enough, and ask questions, and it's okay to get on the phone. I actually have a question regarding, you said, you may not work with everyone. You may not be a good fit. Let's just say you get on the phone with someone and you're like, you're not feeling it. You're feeling like they're rushed, they're unorganized, they're not kind. How would you approach that as being someone who they're interested in, and you're just not feeling like it's a good fit? Because I think a lot of new nurses in that role will take everything, but you're giving people permission to say, hey, it's not, that case may not be for you. What would that advice be to you?
I mean, the risk there is you could be working for, remember, these individuals represent you, right? And it's a little bit different for the expert. The risk that you're having there is, for when you're testifying, there's something called a Daubert challenge. Basically, you can be disqualified as an expert. So if you take every case and you have a lawyer who doesn't really care that much about you, or is not that skilled, and there is a challenge against you as an expert, if they don't fight for you, your career as an expert, your time spent as an expert and being able to provide that service, it could be shorter lived, or certainly constrained. When you have a Daubert challenge, it kind of constrains what you're able to testify against. For somebody who's doing work product, again, you're working with somebody who's going to speak to other individuals and has a network. And I would say, if you're not playing a long enough game. You have to realize that you're playing a long game. And if you're playing a long game, I call it collecting retainers. Collecting retainers is not the game you want to play, right? You are playing you're playing a longer game. And to play the longer game, you have to represent yourself and realize that just taking all the work is, including rush work where you don't think you're going to do a good enough job, is not in your best long-term interest. And if you're working with a team or something, from your perspective, it does your team a disservice to just say yes to everything. Play a longer game. I think that it's okay to say, hey, there's two ways practically of doing it, is just saying I'm too busy, or I'm not, or there's I'm not the right fit. I don't think not replying. I think just ghosting somebody is a bad idea. Right. Bad idea. Right. Give them a reason. I am too busy. I've got some clinical stuff coming up. My docket's full with other work. I don't think I'm the right person, but I think that's where you can provide value too. That's why I hop on the phone. Hey, it sounds like you actually need somebody who does more nursing home stuff. Oh, and by the way, do you have this expert and that expert? I just saved them a bunch of money by they were going to retain the wrong type of GI specialist. Right. Hey, I can actually get somebody for you who you need. You're providing all kinds of value. And I said no to them, that I'm not going to work for them. Like you just did some jujitsu there and flipped the script on them. So it's like, hey, you're saying you need X, Y, and Z. I actually think you need this type of report. And I'm actually not available right now to do that, but I've got somebody who can. And you just said no in the most pleasant way, and provided value. So I would try to find those opportunities rather than just being like, no, I'm busy.
That's great advice. I love that, because you are still providing value and you can kind of easily get away. So and you're right. They'll think of you as the hero, which is even better. So I love that advice. I think that's such great advice.
The other thing I would say,
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry for cutting you off. The other thing I would say in terms of learning, getting feedback, it can be passive feedback. I read other individuals' depositions, and I'm like, holy smokes! Like the way he answered that question, or boy, they were attacking him, and look how you could just, from a holding the deposition across the room, you could see he was frustrated because the answers became longer and longer. Mm-hmm. And, he didn't handle that. So you can learn from inverse, people not doing well or people doing well. So as you're doing the work, that's why I'm saying stay curious and be observant. Look at what other people are doing, not to copy them, but just to benchmark it against yours. And as you get enough reps, you're gonna realize where you fit in the pecking order. Like, I could really improve, this part of my reports. And I know Anne on the West Coast, and boy, I came across one of hers and golly, that was just done so well. And so I think learning from all the work that you come across and that comes across your desk is helpful.
Right. That's great advice. Thank you. Okay. So what does your life look like right now? You're practicing, you're doing expert work. Give us an idea of where you're at right now.
I mean, expert work is catch as catch can. I mean, when we're done here, I'll look at my phone. Maybe there's some emails, maybe not. I haven't taken a case. And this is what I tell folks. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this 10 years. I do a decent amount of expert work. I would say it's been at least 2 weeks, going on 3 weeks since I've taken a case. Mm-hmm. But then, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago, there was a couple cases I came across all in one day. I didn't take all of them. I passed one of them on to my colleague. And so I would say it's unpredictable, this space. And then as you've been doing this for a while, there's more work that churns up. Work begets more work. There's cases that turn into depositions, that turn into trials. And so I have a more mature expert witnessing practice by how many times I'm being deposed and how many times I'm going to trial. So that's happening more frequently, certainly, than it did 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And how do people typically find you? Are you?
Yeah, at this point, I do advertise. I'd love to. I can give you a master class on how I view advertising. I do advertise. I don't need to. The vast majority of my work comes by word of mouth. Individuals that have either worked with me before or have passed. I would say greater than that is they passed on my name, or they were the opposing counsel in a case that I worked on. Mm-hmm. And so that's the other thing that's kind of interesting is like the best advertising you're doing is doing great work because somebody else is going to see it. And that somebody else is likely going to think of you or brag about you or mention you to other individuals when they talk about work. And so I would say referrals is by far, I don't post on social media. Granted, this will be out in the ether, but I don't advertise other than that one ad. And I would say, I mean, I maybe break even on my ad from the number of cases I get.
Sure. No, that's great. I think that, so the word of mouth, it's like you said, a case begets a case. And I have experienced a little bit of that where, I've worked with an attorney and they were like, oh, the opposing counsel really loved your, they were impressed with you, but I didn't want to give them this was in a behind the scenes, but I didn't want to give them your name because I didn't want to, you're my secret weapon. I was like, well, no, it's okay if you give people my name, give the right people my name. So would you say the majority of the work is word of mouth or?
Now certainly.
Yeah.
Or you're saying just as a market?
As a
marketplace?
Yeah.
It certainly is. Yes. I mean, people advertise and there is, and again, kind of an opaque. So this is one person's opinion, but I, live in the space and I'm kind of a student of the sport, if you will. I would say it's, a quarter to a third of the business is probably from advertising. Generally, it depends because everything's it depends on who you're talking about. If you're talking about just physicians and retaining physicians, or if you're talking about ancillary work in the med mal space. But I would say advertising is a minority. I think a lot of it comes from getting that ball rolling downhill and getting people talking to people. And, even if a firm you work for only gives you one case a year, but you now, after doing this for a number of years, have, a number of that network effect starts to compound.
Right.
And it's, you all of a sudden you look back 10 years from now and you're like, holy smokes,
Right.
I have people calling me up that I give cases to colleagues because I just, one, it's either not a good fit, or two, I just don't, the timing is bad.
Right. Okay. Well, we could talk forever about the business side of this. I know that, but this is like an appetizer to that. So I really appreciate you being here and sharing your words of wisdom and your knowledge. And again, the curiosity of the nursing side versus the physician side. And and the story behind, who you are is really where this podcast comes in. Everybody loves to hear the other person's story and just kind of see where they fit into that story, or if they can relate to that story. So I appreciate you sharing your back story. And in the future, obviously, I would love to have you back and we talk a little bit more about the business side of it. But any other advice that you may have for the listeners, for legal nurses out there there are a lot of listeners who are just kind of, getting their feet wet in this world, and this podcast is giving them a little bit of confidence. Any sort of last bit of advice you may have for them?
Sure. I would say medicine by its nature is a apprentice type model where you learn from others who are doing it. I think that model translates nicely into the med mal space. And for those of you who are thinking of doing this, don't be shy. Reach out to those individuals in these networks. Not everybody's busy in their own way, but you will find somebody who's willing to be a mentor, willing to walk you through this. Not everybody is meant to do this, but you got to dip your toes in. See, is your experience just because you're new at it, or because maybe this isn't something that's for you? But doing it alone, it's just not necessary. It's sort of like if I was trying to be a physician, there's a reason that you go through the residency process, and that apprenticeship model is something that I think is present, but you just have to look for it. Thankfully, compared to 10 years ago, you don't have to look as hard. But reach out to those individuals who are a little bit more visible. I'm certain they'll be willing to help you.
Yeah, I love that advice. And that is naturally what has happened with this podcast. Every single week, I get an email or a message that says, from my podcast guest, that says, I received 7, DMs from people who listen to the podcast, who I'm either, they're using them as subcontracting or mentoring them. So my audience isn't shy about doing that, but you reiterated how important that is to just obviously not be shy. And there are people willing to help. So I love that you shared that. And so where can we find you out there in the social world?
So medicalexpertwitness.com. When you're there, I'm making some changes to it depending on when you see this, but there's a link there where you can connect with me. You can actually directly schedule time to chat with me. I do that not infrequently. I speak to several hundred experts a year. Anything from I just wanted to say hi to, business relationships and that sort of thing. So I would say find me at medicalexpertwitness.com, schedule a time to chat. Nurse, PA, NP, physician. I love chatting with everyone in this space, and it'd be great to chat.
And that information will be in the show notes. We'll make sure so you can click on that. Really easy. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your time and all of your advice. And I look forward to chatting with you in the future. And, keep in touch.
Fantastic. Thanks again.
Thank you for joining us in this fun conversation on the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I hope you found this episode as inspiring and empowering as I always do. And I hope that you share this episode with your friends. If you enjoyed it, I would love it if you could leave us a review or comment, as I would love to share them in the future episodes. Or hop on over into my DMs and send me a quick message. I can be found on Instagram at anna.b.gray, on my website at limitlesslnc.com, and over on LinkedIn at Anna Gray. And I want you to remember, you are limitless. Until next time.